Welcome to a springtime flower hand embroidery stitchery project. You're going to get started by taking the light yellow thread off of your thread card. You'll gently pull up on that loop you see at the top, tuck your fingers inside that loop, and that's just a simple way to pull that thread out of a thread card without tangling it. And you'll then kind of separate those threads into one single long strand. And each one of these strands has 6 individual strands within it. That's how DMC floss comes. So you're going to take one single strand there and you're going to cut it at about 40 to 50 inches in length. And the length of the threads that you like to work with may vary over time as you stitch, but this is what I recommend for starting out. So then you're going to secure that thread using the loop method, and to do that you're going to start by pulling a single strand out of that cut thread that you just, the 40 to 50 inch length of thread you just cut. You'll hold that thread in your one hand and gently pull it upward with your other hand, and that's a nice way to pull a single strand out without tangling it. And then you'll just let that kind of that thread that bunched in your hand straighten out and set that aside for future use. And then you're going to take the 2 cut ends of that single strand that you just pulled out together, and that is what you're going to thread your needle with. You'll see that at the opposite end of that, that's where you'll see the loop. And this is important because this is how you're going to secure your thread on your fabric each time you start a new strand as you go. So you're going to take those 2 cut ends and you're going to thread your needle with them, leaving about a 5 to 6 inch tail, which is the opposite end of the loop. And then you can see you're gonna pull your needle up just outside the outline at the center of one petal, and you're gonna take a single straight stitch forward, and that's about the size of an eraser head or 2. And then you're not going to pull that thread all the way through with your first stitch because you need to secure it on your fabric. So you're going to turn your hoop over before that thread is pulled through, and you'll see that loop on the back of your hoop. You're going to weave your needle inside that loop and gently pull, and that's just a wonderful way to secure your working thread on your fabric that's neat and tidy and doesn't require any knots. So now you're going to continue and you're going to stitch the rest of the petal with something called long and short stitch. So I took a second stitch half the length of that first stitch, and then I'm taking a third stitch the length of the first stitch. So basically you're taking a long stitch and then a shorter stitch and then a longer stitch and then a shorter stitch. And you're going to do this kind of working around the side of that petal, and you're going to angle your stitches towards the pistil, the center of that flower. So as you come around to the sides, you're going to find that your stitches are almost kind of going along the length of that outline, and that's okay. And don't get too hung up about the size of the stitches. It really doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to vary the length a bit, but perfection is not an issue with this. You just simply want to have a longer stitch and then a shorter stitch and then a longer stitch and then a shorter stitch for the first row. And long and short stitch is a little bit misleading because the only time you're going to really vary the length of your stitches is in that first row you're doing around the outline of that petal. The rest of your stitches as you fill in are really going to be about the same length. You're just going to be bringing your stitches back down within the first row, and you'll see that in a moment. So for starters, just continue with that long and short stitch all around that outer outline. And I like to start in the center of a petal and work my way to the right, and then I go back to the center and work my way to the left. But that too can vary depending on your personal preference. There really is no hard and fast rules with hand embroidery, which is something I love about it. It's very creative and allows you to kind of do it your way. Okay, I wanted to insert a little video here so that you know what to do when you've been stitching and you reach a point where you have about 4 to 5 inches of thread left on your needle. That's the point at which you want to end your thread on the back of your piece. So you turn your hoop over like you see me doing here, and you simply weave your needle and thread under a few of the stitches on the back of your fabric. And I usually just do this once or twice because I usually grasp several stitches when I do it. I'm doing it 3 times just to show you. And then you just simply snip that thread off right at the level of the fabric so that it doesn't get tangled when you start stitching with your next strand of thread. Okay, and now you can see I'm back to stitching the long and short stitch and filling in that first petal. Okay, now you can see I'm working the opposite side of the petal, again stitching around that outline of the left side of the petal in the exact same manner that I stitched the right side. Again, especially as you come around the curves towards the center, you angle those stitches toward the pistils. Okay, now I'm starting the second row of long and short stitch, which really are just individual straight stitches, varying the length of the stitches just slightly. So you're going to bring your needle up as you see me doing here in front of the stitches where the previous row of stitches ended. Bring your needle up, take a stitch length forward, and take your needle back down between some of those stitches that you previously stitched in the first row. And you're just going to continue in this way until that section is nicely filled in. And you can vary the length of your stitches slightly, but the important thing is that you're ending your stitches within those previous stitches, and that makes for a nice smooth appearance to the finished piece. And you can also reverse the direction of these stitches when you're doing long and short stitch. You can bring your needle up from the back of the fabric within that previous row of stitches and then back down a stitch length forward. That part of it really doesn't matter. The important part is that you're beginning your or ending your stitch somewhere in that row of previous stitches, and that results in a really nice blending of the area. And you do want to make sure that you keep your stitches fairly close together so that you're not leaving any blank open spaces of fabric, because you want the petal to be fully filled in with the thread and the stitching. And angling my stitches a little bit towards the pistils of the flower. And as you go, you can fill in any little gap areas with stitches as you go. So this is a really easy, natural way to stitch. So here you can see I'm just showing you how I filled in one of the petals and kind of how the finished piece will look. Okay, now we're going to use the darker gold thread to stitch French knots for the pistils in the center of the flower. And I'm going to have you take a tiny seed stitch forward with your working thread. This is using the loop method that you used for the light yellow thread to secure your thread on the fabric. So you're taking a tiny seed stitch forward, and then you're going to weave your needle inside that loop on the back of the fabric to secure your working thread on the fabric. And again, that was one long strand of gold thread where you pulled the 2 cut ends together and threaded your needle with those 2 cut ends, leaving the loop so that you could secure your fabric. And now I'm going to teach you a French knot. There you can see a few of them that I stitched already. It's a super fun stitch that gives a lot of dimension to your finished pieces. So you're going to bring your needle up from the back of the fabric in the center where the little dots are. And I'm going to go kind of slow so that you can really see how to do this. So you're going to bring your needle up from the back of the fabric. And then with your dominant hand, you're going to pull that thread off to the side, and you're going to take your needle behind that thread. That's important that it be behind. And you're going to wrap that needle 4 times. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you're going to take your needle holding that thread back down into the fabric, very close to where you had brought your needle up, but not in the same hole. Holding that little thread off to the side is important because that's holding those wraps securely around your needle. You don't want to pull too tight or it'll be hard to pull your needle through the fabric and through those wrapped thread loops. And you also want to hold that little loop right there as you pull your needle through, and that just makes for a really nice clean French knot. So I'll do that again. I'll do that a few times so you can see it. You're bringing your needle up from the back. You're taking your dominant hand off, taking that thread off to the right, then putting your needle behind it and wrapping the needle. And this time I'm going to wrap the needle, let's see, 6 times. So then I'm going to continue holding those wraps, that thread with my right hand, and I'm going to take my needle back down right next to where I had brought my needle up for that stitch. And as I take my needle back down, it's important to hold that thread off to the right. That's holding those loops securely around the needle, but not too tight or it'll be hard to pull your needle through. Keep your fingers on that little loop as you pull that thread through, and that again is part of making a nice clean knot, that you don't let go of that thread with your right hand. So again, you pull the needle up, take the needle up from the back of the fabric, take your right or dominant hand off to the right, put the needle behind your working thread and wrap the needle. The more wraps you do, the larger your French knot, so this is completely up to you. And then you take your needle back down right next to where you had brought your needle up from the back of the fabric. Again, holding that thread off to the right with just a gentle tension, not too hard, but that is part of what gives a nice clean knot on your fabric. So again, we'll do another one. You'll bring your needle up from the back of the fabric, take your working thread off to the side with your dominant hand and wrap that needle. Again, put the needle behind the working thread as you wrap, so you're wrapping from front to back around the needle, and then take your needle back down right next to where you had brought the needle up from the back of the fabric, but not in the same hole, holding that little piece of thread off to the side gently as you pull your needle through. So again, we'll do another one. Bringing the needle up from the back of the fabric. Hold that thread off to the side with your dominant hand. Put your needle behind that working thread and wrap it front to back as many times as you choose. The more wraps, the larger your French knot will be. And then holding that thread so that there's nice tension on those wraps around your needle, put your needle back down through the fabric right next to where you had brought it up, but not in the same hole. And again, you hold that thread off to the side, that little loop gently as you pull your needle through, and that results in a nice crisp French knot. So we'll do one more. Bringing your needle up from the back of the fabric. Take that working thread off to the side, put your needle behind it, wrap it, and then holding those wraps by holding a gentle tension on that thread, put your needle back through the fabric right next to where you had brought it up, and gently pull it through while you hold that thread with just a gentle tension. As you stitch your French knots, you'll find that the thread starts to get shorter and it becomes a little bit more difficult to wrap the thread around your needles, and that's your signal that it's time to finish off your thread on the back of the fabric, like I showed you, by weaving it through a few of those stitches on the back of the fabric and trimming it off. And then you'll simply start with a fresh strand of gold thread, and again take a tiny little seed stitch and secure that thread on the back of the fabric using the loop method that I've shown you before, and then proceed with a French knot that you stitch right on top of that tiny little seed stitch to cover it. Okay, now we're going to stitch the stem with split back stitch, and you're going to begin by taking a single straight stitch forward, and you're going to secure that working thread on the back using the loop method, which you've done twice now. And again, that's like the cleanest, nicest way I know for securing an even number of strands of thread. And this time you're going to bring your needle up a stitch length past where that previous stitch ended along that stem. You're going to bring your needle up, and then you're going to take it back down, splitting that first stitch in the middle. That's why it's called split back stitch. So again, you're going to take a stitch length forward up that stem, and then you're going to take your needle back down by splitting that last stitch you stitched, the previous stitch. And again, you're just going to continue in this manner all the way up the stem and the stems of the leaf when you reach that section as well. So I'm taking my needle back down by splitting that previous stitch, and again taking my needle up from the back of the fabric a stitch length forward beyond where that previous stitch ended, and then splitting that previous stitch and taking my needle to the back of the fabric. So this is a great stitch for stitching stems, and I use it for stitching lettering sometimes. It's a very versatile stitch to learn. So again, you're just going up the length of that stem from the back, a stitch length forward, bringing your needle up from the back, and taking your needle back down by splitting that previous stitch. Okay, and now you can see I'm coming to the top of the stem and I'm taking my last back stitch for that row, and then I'm going to stitch another row of back stitch directly on top of this row. So you'll see I'm bringing my needle up from the back of my fabric, making sure I didn't come up in the same spot I took my last stitch down in, or I would have pulled the stitch out. And I'm just going down the length of that stem in the exact same way, just in the opposite direction, stitching back, split back stitch. So I'm going a stitch length forward, and then I'm splitting that previous stitch as I go down the stem. And that gives a nice pop to the stem and helps ensure that the outline of the stem is covered nicely. And I just like the added dimension of stitching another row on top of the first one. Okay, and next, after we've stitched the stem, we're going to stitch a stitch called Fishbone Stitch for each leaf. So you're going to begin by bringing your needle up from the back of the fabric at the very tip of one of the leaves. So in this case, I'm working the leaf on the left. So you can see I'm bringing my thread, my needle up at the very tip, just outside that outline. And I'm going to take my needle back down about 1/4 to 1/3 of the way down the leaf. Might have made mine a little short this time. But you're going to take it down that center section of the leaf. And then you're going to bring your needle up right next to it. In this case, I'm going on the right side, snuggled right next to it along the line of that outline. And you're going to take it down across that center line. So you're not staying on the center line, you're going right across the center line and down just a little tiny bit from where that previous stitch ended. So you're going to take your needle down, so it's a little bit of a diagonal stitch, and then you're going to do the same thing on the other side. You're going to bring your needle up right along the line, just outside that outline, this time on the opposite side of the tip of the flower. And you're going to cross over that line, and you're going to take your needle down just out below where that previous center stitch ended, but to the side of it, right to the side of that center line. You're not ending your stitches on the line. You're kind of crisscrossing it. So again, you're going to continue doing that. You're going to bring your needle up again now on the other side again, right just outside that outline, following the shape of the leaf. And this time you're going to take it right down underneath where that previous diagonal stitch ended, and take your working thread back. And again, you're going to do the same thing on the other side. So you're going to bring your needle up right along that outline, snuggled close, because you don't want any gaps when you do fishbone stitch. You want the stitches to stay snuggled close together. And then you're going to take your needle just below that previous stitch on the opposite side of the center line. So it's just a slightly diagonal stitch, and you just continue this way all the way down the flower, and it really creates a beautiful shape of a leaf with a nice center veining that's really easy to accomplish by simply doing stitching in this manner. So that is it. You just stitch little diagonal stitches all the way down the leaf. And you'll find as you get down to the end, the stitches are going to be quite tiny. And sometimes with odd-shaped leaves, you'll have to stitch stitches just on one side at the very bottom if you have filled in the other side of the leaf. Okay, you'll see as you get to the bottom of that leaf that the stitches get quite tiny, and you may end up stitching several stitches in a row on one side if you've completed the other side, depending on the shape of the leaf that you're stitching. And once you get to that bottom, you'll fill in that little tiny stem with a row of split back stitch along that small tiny stem, and then you'll stitch another row of split back stitch on top of the base layer, just as you did the main stem. And there you have it. I hope that you enjoyed this lovely art as much as I do, and find that having a creative outlet in your life brings you joy. And I wish you a blessed day. And I also will have videos on how to frame on my YouTube channel soon.